Where is the recording? Invite her. I don't see her in attendees, so can someone else do the tilawat?
Is someone else willing to recite a few verses from the Holy Quran?
Okay, I can do it.
Sure, sir. That would be.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Now over to you, Salman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank all of you, Dr. Sadek, Dr. Sairesh, and Dr. Amir, for taking out your time and to be with us here today. Thank you so much. Now moving on to the webinar. The webinar that is titled Research Publications Unboxed. It has been made possible by the combined efforts of Mohideen Research Club of Mohideen Medical College, Mirpur Azad, Jammu Kashmir, the Nishtar Research Council Student Forum of Nishtar Medical University, Multan, and CMH Student Research Club of CMH Lahore Medical College and Institute of Dentistry. I myself am a member of the Nishtar Research Council Student Forum, which is a student-based research society which focuses on promoting research at undergraduate level. We aim to provide research opportunities to the students by providing guidance for the research process. Now, moving on to our first speaker, I would like to introduce Dr. Sadek Naveed. Dr. Sadek is currently serving as a program director for psychiatry residency program at ECHN. He also serves as an associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Connecticut and Quinnipiac University. He has completed a master's in public health from Benedictine University and an infant parent mental health fellowship at the University of Massachusetts. He currently serves as an editor of Biomed Central Journal for Psychiatry and has authored several peer-reviewed publications. Dr. Naveed has been recognized as a fellow of the APA and the distinguished fellow of AACAP. Dr. Naveed, if you would like to start your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I really appreciate all the student societies for coming together in this really, interesting endeavor, because this is the need of the time, and I really want to appreciate the moderators and hosts for inviting me to be part of this activity. It is a pleasure, and it's definitely a privilege. Can you see my slide set? Attendees, can you see my slide set? So if you can see it, just say yes. Okay, so since we are stretched with time and we have a lot to cover, I will just focus on main highlights. This is sort of, appetizer that you're gonna get today. So what is research? So research is a systematic inquiry that is used to describe, predict, and control the observed phenomena. It can include both inductive and deductive methods. So it's research always have some sort of system that involves, and whatever answer you want to have for a question, that is usually done in a very precise and structured process. And while you're doing this, you can describe certain things about a population. For example, you can do descriptive statistics, you can predict things, and you can also do experimental studies. So this is a sort of a brief research definition. What is the purpose of research? Especially in clinical research, our goal is to improve the lives of others or improve the well-being indicators for other in whatever specialty that may come from. And that can happen through scientific inquiry and innovation. Almost all the clinical knowledge comes from the research-based or evidence-based knowledge. We can also use it to formulate policies and guidelines, and it can also be used to evaluate a program development and satisfaction. For example, if there is a community program that is providing psych services to patients, you can use research-related methods just to see if program is designed good enough and if it is meeting the needs of the population. And for individual reasons, everyone has multiple reasons why they want to engage in research. It can be, like I mentioned, to improve the lives of others. It can be to for your own recognition. So this is I just listed few, but there can be an exhaustive list of things that can be included here. So I'm going to keep talking, but I also wanted to have more interactive discussion. So if you guys have any questions along the way, just post in the comments. When we look at the quality of evidence, so this is the hierarchy of evidence. This is how we see different studies, that they are divided into study designs, and also the critical appraisal that is needed with the studies. So by critical appraisal, what is meant? It is that how good the studies are. So if you look on the top, there are meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and there are evidence-based practice guidelines. So what they do is they gather the data from different studies. There is a rigorous process that is involved in this, and we also review the quality of evidence. So for example, if we are doing a systematic review for a randomized controlled trial for effectiveness of ketamine in depression, so it's going to look at the effectiveness of ketamine in depression, but it's also going to review the quality of the studies that would be included. The next in the process in the hierarchy of evidence is randomized controlled trials and non-randomized controlled trials. And we'll talk a little bit about that in future slides. And then the next one is observational studies. So there are experimental studies and there are observational studies. In experimental studies, the researcher intervenes. So that's why it is an experimental study. So there is an intervention and there is an outcome. In observational study, you usually follow the course of illness, or you follow patients over time, but you don't intervene. You run a certain illness or certain population cohort, run a course and observe the outcomes at the end of it. So those are your cohort studies, case control studies, and then at the bottom, you will say case series and case reports. So case reports would be something that is novel to the scientific world, and this is something new, and you want scientific world to know about that. So you can report it as a case report. So for example, we did this case report on aripiprazole-induced neutropenia. There was a single case, and then if I would have more than one case, then that will become a case series. At the end, there are some expert opinions that you can write, opinion articles, commentaries. So this is your hierarchy of evidence. Now, what are different study designs that exist? So there are experimental study designs where, like I mentioned, there is an intervention of the researcher that is involved, and then you see how's it going to change our outcomes. So for example, ketamine for depression, right? And there are two types of experimental studies: randomized controlled trials and non-randomized controlled trials. So I don't want to go too much in detail of this, but this is sort of an introductory talk. Then there are observational studies, which can include cohort studies, case control studies, cross-sectional studies, ecological studies. So in these studies, your participants are observed, but there is no action or intervention from the researcher. Let me give you an example from that. In next slide, ecological studies, if you see in the bottom right, they include population-based studies. So these are different study designs that you probably need to know at this level. So how are the case control studies different from cohort studies or retrospective cohort studies? In case control study, you pick a case or an illness or someone with a disease. For example, you pick a patient with lung cancer and you want to study the risk factors that may have happened that patient. So you pick 50 patients who have lung cancer and 50 patients who don't have a lung cancer, and then you go back in time and trace for risk factors. So if you see, there is an emission of man, so that is end of the study. after disease has happened, and you go back in time and you look for exposures. In the next one, which is prospective cohort, you pick the man who is exposed to some risk factors. So there's an exposure that has happened, and you track that man over time and see what kind of diseases they will build. For example, the diseases they will have in future. So for example, you pick people who has history of smoking or history of alcoholism, and you track them over time to see if they develop any certain diseases. So in those studies, they are called prospective cohort. Now, retrospective cohort can be a little bit, difficult to understand. Retrospective cohort is like in this, if you see the animation of man in this, the disease probably already has happened. But you still go back and look for the risk factors and you track them forward in time. So just to make it easier. So for example, I did a study where I collected data for patients with smoking, and the data was collected from 2005 to 2022. Now here I'm in 2023. I want to see whether smoking can. So originally I reported that smoking can cause lung cancer. Now I want to see whether smoking can cause ischemic heart disease or a heart attack. So what I do is I go back in time, I look at my data, I look at patients who has history of smoking versus patient who has not history of smoking. I track them forward in time and I see if they have developed ischemic heart disease or heart attack. So that's your retrospective cohort at that time. So case control study, you pick patients with illnesses, you go back in time and you see whether they have exposure to certain risk factors. In prospective cohort, you pick patients with risk factors who have been exposed to risk factors, and you track them forward in time and see if they develop certain diseases. Now, retrospective cohort is that disease has happened. So disease has happened. Now you're at this time point now, but you want to look at patients who have been exposed to the risk factors like smoking. You forward them in time and see what kind of disease they build. So I'm going to move on from this. So when we look at the hierarchy of evidence, this is what we looked at. This is just another picture. I look at review articles into two broader types. So one is more structured, more rigorous methodology. That would be your systematic reviews and your scoping reviews. And then there are other sort of publications that are not as structured, like narrative literature review. You can write opinion articles, you can write commentaries, you can write letter to editors. Now, these are different type of reviews, narrative literature review, and we'll learn about the differences between them. So narrative literature review, scoping review, and systematic review. Now, systematic review is where you go through a rigorous process. So for example, when I look at ketamine for depression, I look at the databases like PubMed, Scopus, Google Scholar, name it, and I extract studies based on a methodology, all the randomized controlled trials, for example, on ketamine in depression. And I select them based on a methodology where they meet the certain criteria. And then I report their analysis in a qualitative form where there are not numbers attached, where there are just descriptive forms attached. And if I pool the results of all the, effectiveness number from all those studies into one single number, that would be your meta-analysis. So for example, there are 5 randomized controlled trials that I found through extensive screening. And in those 5 trials, they report ketamine's effectiveness for depression. And now these are different trials. If I pool their results into one single estimate, that is your meta-analysis. Now, what is the difference between these review articles, different types of review articles? So if you see in systematic review, there is a protocol. So you write that protocol at the beginning, that what would be your methodology. That is not involved in literature review. You register that protocol, you go through a very strict screening process for systematic review, you build extraction forms, you look at the risk of bias, which is how good these studies are when it comes to like selection bias, information bias, iteration bias, how good these studies are. and then you interpret your evidence based on that, which does not happen if you see on traditional literature reviews. So that's why when you look at this hierarchy of evidence, systematic reviews are on top, because it's very rigorous methodology, and you deeply look for risk of bias. Now, all of this endeavors, like, observational studies, randomized control trials, your systematic reviews, can translate into different publication types. It can be reported as, if you're publishing, let's say, an observational study on smoking and lung cancer, that can be published as a regional research, or it can be, if it is, shorter and there's not a lot to report, you can publish it as short report. Letter to editors, commentaries, and opinion articles are mostly on any contemporary issues where you want to share your opinion about something. So for example, suicide, it is criminalized in many countries. So if I want to write about this decriminalization of suicide and I want to advocate for that, something I can write as an opinion articles. And then we talked about different sort of review articles, case reports, and then you can also, there are some journals who will just publish your methodology or data depository. They will also publish some video publications. So these are different publication types that you can do in a journal. Now let's look at the structure of article. Now it can vary depending on what kind of publication type you're doing. So regional research may have a little bit different, letter to editor may have something different structure and commentaries. And usually journals will tell you what kind of structure they want. So make sure when you are publishing or submitting an article to a journal, you look at their instructions to authors, and it will give a very detailed instructions on how to do that. Now, let's look at the anatomy of an article, and I'll show you one example as an example. So on the first one is title. So title is sort of a one-liner description of that describes your study very well. And then comes your abstract. Abstract is a sort of a standalone summary of your article. So if someone reads your abstract, they can know what did you do in that study, what are your results and conclusions. So most journals will allow only 250 words to 300 words or 350 words for abstract. So it is like, if I use an Urdu word, would like you aap dal ko chakhe ya chawal ko chakhe, and then you can tell, what is happening there rather than eating the whole plate of rice. And then in introduction, so in introduction, you talk about the problem that you're discussing. So for example, in ketamine for depression, I will talk about treatment-resistant depression, the implication of having that, evidence that exists for other pharmacological agents. And then I will pass on that conversation into the role of ketamine and why I'm doing this article. And then methods, which is like exactly how it says, what did the author do to answer the question? So like, what were different steps were involved? For example, whether study got an IRB approval, how did you do the participant recruitment? What kind of outcome measures did you publish? Like if I'm doing depression, what kind of scales I'd use for depression? And then statistical analysis and so this is your methods, and whatever you find out and you want to report, that is your results. And then in the discussion, I have a separate slide, so let's go to the discussion piece. So like I mentioned, abstract has a structure. For most journals, some journals will say we just accept unstructured abstract, which means you don't need to have these headings of objectives, methods, results, and conclusion. But many would require. So in abstract, you summarize the major section of the paper. It's a standalone document. It helps readers determine if this will answer the research question. So let's say if I want to treat a patient with treatment-resistant depression, I can just go look into PubMed and read the abstract and see whether this article is relevant to me or not. Sorry. We did talk about introduction a little bit. So in introduction, you will talk about identification of problem domain. You will discuss what has been done in the past, what are the knowledge gaps that exist, and what are the objectives of your study. So that these are introduction, and I will show you a paper. In discussion, usually the first paragraph starts off with summarizing the key finding from the results. Like you mentioned, if we are discussing ketamine for depression, I will summarize everything that I got in results, but you don't repeat the statistics again. And then you pick, some areas that you want to discuss. So for example, dose of ketamine, the effectiveness, whether there were certain subgroups or patient population that it worked better. For example, it worked better with male, not worked better with females. And what can be the rationale behind that? And then you compare it to the existing evidence to see whether there is something new that you learn, whether there was something in contrast to previous evidence you learned, and what can be the rationale for that. So in discussion, you summarize the existing the results, you synthesize like important highlights of the results, and then you compare and contrast with the existing evidence. Then you talk about your limitations of your study and what can be the future steps. So this is sort of your discussion. Now, in conclusion, you summarize the findings from the existing evidence and what did you learn from that study and the future pathway. So that is sort of structure of your article, and I will quickly walk you through that. And now references can be of two types. One is in-text citation, and then there are some, the other one is references or bibliographies. So to cite in articles and do the references, you can use different reference management softwares. Mendeley is one that is free, easy to use, and there can be you can find YouTube videos to find out how to use that, and it actually makes your job pretty easy. So let's look at the structure of an article just by an example. So here's an article that we published. Can you see the paper here? Can someone say yes? If they
Yes,
can
we
see.
can see it.
Okay.
Yes,
So this is a review article that we wrote. So this is the top one is the therapeutic role of cannabidiol in mental health, a systematic review. So this is your title of abstract, title of the article. If you look at the abstract, it has background, it has objectives, what are we trying to study, material and methods, results, and conclusion. And so this is sort of a standalone summary. So if you're reading this, you can know just by looking at it, what is, the summary of the article. So that's a standalone document. Next is the introduction. So in introduction, we opened up about cannabis, what is actually cannabis stevia, what different salt does it has, and what are the existing, what is the receptor profile, how does it work. Then we talked about the pharmacokinetic profile of the drugs, what other medications have been approved that came off from marijuana derivative, what's the evidence in psychiatry. So this was our introduction in that. So you write the problem statement, you review what has been discussed previously, where are knowledge gaps, and what is it that you are trying to study here. So for example, this article broadly reviews the efficacy and safety of the CBD and CBD containing compounds in mental health. Then comes your method piece. This is a systematic sort of review article. So its methodology is going to be different than a traditional research article. So eligibility criteria, search strategy, what exactly we did, data extraction, and then quality of evidence. And then we came with the results. And in the results section, you report, okay, you did all these things. What did you find out? So here is the qualitative synthesis that we created from the results. So we discussed the evidence for schizophrenia, marijuana use disorder, Tourette's, and all of that. And at the last, there was, a separate section for discussion where we sort of summarize all the information and what exists. So summary of evidence, recommendation for future research, and limitation for review. And then last section is conclusion. Now, if you see at the end, there are references. So can someone in the chat tell me what do they understand by references? So one-liner. So what is meant by a reference? So reference is, let's see. So reference is actually, yeah. So where the information is being cited or quoted. And when you're doing the reference, you also list at the end as a bibliography, all the references. And then in the actual text of the article, you also do in-text citations, which means that within the article, by numbering or by using APA format, you see, okay, this information is coming from this article. And if you want to look at the full reference for that article, you can look at the bibliography. And when this article will be published, that article will receive a citation. And then we'll talk about the H-index and the impact factor and how all of that works. Now, they also wanted me to talk about the review or editorial process. So what happens? So I'm an editor of BMC Psychiatry. So let's say, I'm going to take example of Salman here. So Salman published a paper. So it came to my editorial staff. So they see whether the article that is submitted, it aligns with the instructions for authors. If it does not, they're going to send it back to you. So whenever you are publishing an article, make sure that you review instructions for author very closely. That's the number one reason for desk rejection. So which means that even if it gets to me before as an associate editor, it's going to be rejected. So make sure you read instructions of authors very well and you comply with it completely. So then from the editorial staff, it goes to an associate editor or editor. Editors look at the article, like the second one, and see whether it meets with the aims and scope of the article, of the journal, whether, how the methodology of studies, whether it is worth publishing, whether there are not a lot of technical flaws in that. And if they are satisfied, then they will invite peer reviewers. So peer reviewers can be like Dr. Amir is here, Dr. Amir Ijaz, and anyone who has expertise in the field, they are invited to review that article. As a peer reviewer, my job is to ensure whether this article is good enough to be published. And I review that as a reviewer, or Dr. Amir Ijaz does that, and see whether there are any possible improvement areas, and they recommend it to the authors. If they feel like, no, this paper cannot be mitigated, they have not done a good job, and revision would not help at all, they will send it back to the editor or associate editor, and we will send a rejection. But let's say if they say, okay, this article is good, but it needs some revision, and then it can be published. So then they will send it as a major or minor revision. If you see on the top slide, there is a loop. So reviewers send it back to editors, editors send it to authors, authors make changes based on the peer review comments and send it back to the editorial staff. And then the process continues until editors and reviewers feel like, okay, this article is good, it's ready to be published, and then it gets published. So this is sort of the process that happens at the back end. So just make sure that, rejections, major revisions, minor revisions, that they are part of the scholarly work. No one has published enough if they have not received a rejection or revision request. So don't feel frustrated about that. The purpose of that is to improve the quality of article. And when you're responding to the peer reviewer, make sure that you give you respond to them point by point in a very nice way, just keeping that in mind, that their goal is not to ding you or to let you not publish. Their goal is to improve the quality of the article. So let's move on from this slide. Now, when we look at the characteristics of journal, there are a few key things that we look for: aim and scope, right? Scope is what kind of articles this journal publishes. For example, Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry is not going to publish on hematology and oncology and cardiology. It's only going to publish articles on the articles that are related to child and adolescent psychiatry. So make sure when you are looking for possible journals, you look at aim and scope of the articles. That's your first place to start. Second thing that you look for is where this article is indexed. So all the journals are deposit their articles in certain databases like PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science. And based on that, we assess for how good that journal is. So make sure that your article, your journal that you're publishing is at least indexed in PubMed. If it is not, and you really need to publish it, then at least Google Scholar. If it is not published and that journal is indexed in PubMed as Google Scholar, our Scopus, our PsycInfo, Psych articles, from psychiatry standpoint, it's not worth publishing in that journal. And there are a lot of predatory journals who mention a lot of databases that are not good enough. Let me look at time. I'm a little bit over my time. So impact factor is, if you read the second line, the average our journals, sorry, give me 1 second. So what is impact factor? It measures the frequency with which the average article in a journal has been cited in a particular time period. And this is done by a Clarivate analysis. So how do you calculate that? So this is calculated based on last 2 articles that are published in 2 years. So for example, if you want to calculate the impact factor for 2022 for a journal, you look at the articles that are published in 2020 and 2021 and how much citation they received in 2022. So just to give you an example, so for example, Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry received 1,200 citations for articles published in 2021 and 2020. Okay, so last 2 years, the articles that were published in last 2 years, they received 1,200 citations. Now, how many articles that journal published in 2021 and 2020? Let's say they published about 100 articles. So 100 articles received 1,200 citations. So the impact factor will come down to 12 impact factor. And that tells you about the perceived quality of the article and publications that they receive. And I'm using the word perceive, but because that might be highly inaccurate. A lot of good studies get published in low impact factor journals. So if it is not published in a high impact factor journal, it really does not mean that it's not a good quality study. And if it is published in high impact factor, it may not be good study. So you need to evaluate for that. Now, impact factor, can you guys not hear me? Can people hear me? Okay.
You're audible, sir.
Okay, attendees can hear me. Okay, so while impact factor look at the academic footprint of the journal, these H index and I-10 index look at the academic footprint of the researcher or author. So there are two measures that we use. One is H index and second one is I-10 index. So they are measure of academic footprint. And remember, these are not the perfect tools, but something for us to help with. So what does I-10 index does? I-10 index measures for the number of publications with at least 10 citations. So for example, this is my profile. So my I-10 index is 45. So it means that I have 45 papers that have at least 10 citations, okay? H index looks for number of papers with the citation number equal to number of the papers. So for example, my H index at this time is 22, which means I have 22 articles that have at least 22 or more citations. If your H index is 15, that would mean that that author has at least 15 publications that has 15 citation each or more. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm ready to take any questions. I know it was a sort of quick glimpse. So Salman, how do you want to do it? Do you want to ask questions and I can answer it, or I can just pick from the chat, however it works for you.
So I have the list of questions right here, so I can
Okay.
read them out to you.
Okay, sounds good.
The first question is, where does a clinical audit or a quality institutional placement study stands in the pyramid of evidence?
So I will say, the clinical audit is still a sort of an observational study. So I will rank it somewhere there, because what are you doing is you are just doing the audit. You're just looking at, whether the good quality services have been provided or not. In a similar example, if you do that, to improve the services, that would be a quality improvement effort.
Another question is, are traditional literature review and narrative literature review the same?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're the same, right? And what is meant by review article?
So a review article is actually, her name suggests, is a review of the evidence. So let's say I publish a review articles. I'm not doing all those studies, but based on the existing evidence from, like, say, randomized controlled trials, observational studies, I just publish an article that sort of reviews or gives a summary of all those existing original studies, or what we call it, like descriptive or analytical analytical research. So that the evidence is, the summary of that evidence would be more like a review article.
Okay. Are LTE and editorial the same?
Yeah, I think they're about the same. There's not major differences. Only one thing is, sometimes editors of the articles of the journal write editorials too. So sometimes they invite others to write the editorial. So that can be same, but editorials are mostly written by, for example, the chief editor, or any of the editorial anyone on editorial board.
Difference between citation and article.
So article is a publication, right? I showed you a paper that was an article. Citation means how many times my study has been used by other in their research article. So for example, if I have citation number for an article 5, so there were 5 other research articles or studies or review articles that used my article to feed information into their article.
Okay. Are review articles and narrative reviews the same?
Yes, yeah, they're the same. I think someone also asked a good question about case control and
Difference
retrospective.
between, yes, case control and
So
retrospective
case
cohorts.
control, Kashif, is the people with who already has illnesses or diseases. And retrospective cohort is where they have exposure to risk factors, and then you track them over time. So they don't have illnesses at that time. So for example, patient with lung cancer, and you track their risk factors, that is a case control study. They have illnesses. And the retrospective cohort would be that you pick patient who has been exposed to some sort of risk factor and see what kind of diseases or illnesses they can develop. So that would be retrospective cohort.
We have another question. If I add an in-text citation in my article, will that be picked up as plagiarism by softwares like Grammarly?
So I think, if you're doing an in-text citation, there are different ways to do, if you want to do like the exact wording from another article, then you do the quote within the paper, and then you cite that. But if you're paraphrasing it, and if you're, using the reference, then it is in-text citation, and it is okay to do that. It's not plagiarism. My rule of thumb is, if there is something that is not a common knowledge to a layperson, it should be cited. You should paraphrase it. I don't think we have more questions.
Yes, I think that's it. Thank you, Dr. Sadiq, for your time and an amazing presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sadiq, for such worthy words and guidance. I'm looking forward to hearing you speak again. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Inshra Risahi, Head of Research Training Department, National Cabinet Muhyiddin Research Club. I'm the student of final year MBBS from Muhyiddin Islamic Medical College. I warmly welcome you all in this webinar, and I'm honored to invite second speaker from Muhyiddin Islamic Medical College, Brigadier Professor Dr. Amir Ijaz. He is currently serving as Head of Pathology Department, MIMC. Please, sir, have some words on research ethics.
Thank you very much, Inshra, for inviting me, and I'm thankful to, first of all, the Muhyiddin Research Club, headed by Furqan. Furqan is an amazing person. He works a lot for promotion of health in not only in his own college, but also now he has a lot of collaboration, and he's collaborating with many institutes. First, let me appreciate Dr. Naveed for his excellent presentation. He talked very nicely, and he told you, the young guys, how to do the publications and what are the various types. And this was very useful information that will go throughout your life. I tell you, it is really very important for your career that you do a lot of research and publish, and that after you qualify, you do your MBBS or you do your post-graduation, the difference between a good doctor and bad doctor, of course, it is the ethics and the how many research efforts you have done. So whenever you are doing the research and publications, you have to follow some ethics, and ethics are now very, very important. And I think right from the beginning, you should know what is a good way of doing research and publications. So I will start with the ethics. Ethics come in the various forms. For example, medical ethics related to the medical practice, how you do your practice in the field as a doctor or as a nurse or other paramedical staff. And then research ethics, what you when you start your research, how you have to follow the ethics, and what are the good things you have to do, and what are the bad things you do not have to do. And then once you have completed the research and want to publish it, then what are the ethics of publication? My exact topic is publication ethics, but will also come. I will start my talk with the research ethics, not in detail, in brief introduction of research ethics. And in research ethics, I will tell you what not to do in medical research. I have already given a detailed talk on this in our own college of webinar, but I think some of part of it needs to be repeated here. I'm here telling you what not to do. And there is an extreme of unethical practice. We will learn about it. Then total lack of research integrity and other incidents, and dual use of research of concern. The anthrax story, I will not talk the third one, but first two ones. This is a very horrible incident which occurred in medical science. It is called Tuskegee syphilis study. It occurred in United States from 1932 to 1972. It is the worst human research. What they did is it is a highly unethical syphilis experiment was conducted by U.S. Public Health Services and the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, USA. What they did is very simple. In simple words, they employed about 400 people. All of them were black from the low socioeconomic conditions, and all of them were positive or diagnosed for syphilis. Syphilis, is one of the venereal diseases. And it was now it can be fully treated, but at that time its treatment was not available, and they wanted to study the various stages of syphilis. There are 3-4 stages of syphilis: primary, tertiary, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So they wanted to study those stages. So these poor farmers from one county, they were denied any treatment. The bad thing was, first they were not told that what going to be a uh, going to be done with these people, and secondly, they were denied any form of treatment with absolutely no informed consent. They were poor and were used as a test subjects, offered free meals, healthcare, and burial stipends of just $50. A cohort of government officials went to extreme length to ensure that they received no therapy. This was done by Public Health Department of United States. And you can find this story in detail in this link, which I can send you in the group also. So ultimately, one of the officials involved in the study, he broke the news in the press, and everybody then started the protest, and the study was stopped. And after 20 years, in 1997, U.S. President himself came on the press and had tendered apology for this. And those who were surviving, they were given heavy compensation. So this is a bad story that we must not do study without consent. So what we learned from Tuskegee, that informed consent is a must for study. Patient safety is of utmost importance. Bias in subject selection is unwanted because they selected only the black community and of the poor region. So it's not acceptable. And any study which harms a patient is not acceptable. 5 tenets of informed consent: information disclosure. You have to tell your patients, your subjects, what you are going to do, and then you make sure that they understand it. You have to use minimum medical terms or scientific terms. Then it should be competent enough. It should not be like that an incompetent person is taking the consent, because if he or she himself or herself doesn't know the disease, how can he take the consent? Then there should be voluntariness. That means the subject should voluntarily come in it. Yeah, without any very big attraction. You may give them some support for their expenses, or it's no harm in that. But still, they should be joining your study on voluntary basis, and they should be excuse me. They should be independent in making decisions. Not only in the start of the study, but also during the study, they should be independent. So these are the 5 tenets of informed consent. Assess understanding of the major elements of the consent. If there is a voluntarily agreement to participate, obtain signature. Initials were indicated and date from the subject. Consenter must also sign and date. provide a copy of the consent form to the study subject, complete the consent process documentation form and file. Consent is a process, it's not just a form. So you have to give time to the subjects, explaining them, giving them the information, and then getting it. And even after that, it must continue during the study also. There is another thing which is called data safety monitoring boards. The data safety monitoring boards are usually the part of uh, mm, the institution review boards, or the institution uh, committee which is giving the consent, which is giving the permission of the study. They, even during the study, when study has started, they monitor the data to see is there any unethical practice being done. The ethical monitoring of data generated in an ongoing research project. Any untoward outcome may lead to abolishing. If they find that for example, they are studying a drug, and they found that this drug is producing some very bad effects, the study can be stopped. Now, in another example, this which is a positive example, is of diabetes complication control trial, DCCT, which was published in 1993. Initially, this study was this was a landmark study, started in 1990s in United States. It was a multi-billion-dollar study involving large number of type 1 diabetics. Halfway through the study, the statistician announced that the benefit of intervention is so prominent that it is unethical to keep the control group devoid of its benefits. Please try to understand what actually happened. That the study was initially planned, for example, for 3 years, but and there were two groups. One was given a typical form of treatment of diabetes. The other was given a traditional form of treatment. After 1.5 years, not exactly 1.5, whatever the duration was, the statistician told that the rate of complications of nephropathy and retinopathy, they are so less in the new treatment group, as compared to the traditional treatment group, that it is unethical to devoid of the control group of the new treatment, so that they also should have a lesser complications of diabetes. So after that, after the institution's announcement, the study was stopped, and it was published, and now it is part of the diabetes guidelines, treatment guidelines. Second is, when you are publishing a study, there should be integrity in it. Now, here a glaring example of false claim about a new drug is thalidomide tragedy. This tragedy occurred, first entered the German. Thalidomide is a drug. It first entered in the German market in 1957 as an over-the-counter remedy for insomnia. Over-the-counter means you could get the medicine without any prescription. In West, you cannot get medicine without prescription, but this medicine was available without prescription. It was for the insomnia. And it was claimed that it is completely safe for everyone, including mother and child, even during pregnancy. So it was claimed that it is very safe for the in the pregnancy for mother and child. Also alleviates morning sickness, which happens in the first trimester of pregnancy. But you can see what happened. Many of the children born, they were having anomalies. You can see this child is having improper arm. His arm is not developed. Here also you can find some disabilities. In the few short years that thalidomide was available, it is estimated that over 10,000 babies were affected by the drug worldwide. About half died within months of being born. The thalidomide babies who survived lived with the effects of the drug along with their families. So it was bad integrity, bad information, which led to this tragedy. The use of honest and verifiable methods in proposing, performing, and evaluating research. It's a must, and we will discuss further in our subsequent slides. Reporting research results with particular attention to adherence to rules, regulations, and guidelines. You have to be very careful in reporting your data, because it can lead to some bad effects if you have cooked it, if you have done some wrong, given some wrong information. Following community commonly accepted professional codes or norms. Shared values in scientific research, honesty. You have to be very honest, convey information truthfully and honoring commitments. Accuracy, report finding precisely and take care to avoid errors. Efficiency, use resources wisely and avoid wastage. Objectivity, let the facts speak for themselves and avoid improper bias. So these are the shared good values of research, which you should follow when you are carrying research. You are, as I said earlier, you, mashallah, you are all young people who are going to do a lot of research in your career. But remember this thing, that your wrong information, your hidden information can lead to some havoc in the society. So please be honest, be accurate, efficient, and objective. Now, how we follow, what are the ethics we follow, and who has formulated these ethics? There are two publication guidelines. One is called Recommendations for the Conduct, Reporting, Editing, and Publication of Scholarly Work in Medical Journals. It is guideline by the International Committee of Medical Journals Editor, ICMG. Almost every journal which is publishing these days, they follow this guideline. This is very, very important. ICMG guidelines. Previously, it was called, the second is Committee of Publication Ethics, or COPE. Let's see individually what these guidelines are. Guideline by ICMG, recommendation for the conduct, reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly work in medical journals. It has started in 1978, and previously it was called Uniform Requirements of Manuscripts Submitted to Biomedical Journals. So in many older journals, you may find this thing. This is part of the all the journals, but now it is called these wordings are used instead of these wordings. Okay, several editions have been published. Almost after 1 or 2 years, they give the update, new edition. And these guidelines are usually, rather mostly, part of the any journal, and they in their hard copy or in their online versions, they give these guidelines. They may make their own some little modification in these, but almost all of them, they stick to these guidelines. Okay. So these guidelines are available as the link provided, and this is the page. I've copied this page, and this is ICMGE, International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and it's recommendation. You can download it. Anybody can download it. It is free, absolutely free, and this is I have the downloaded part of this. Of course, it cannot be used in an unauthorized way, but for teaching purpose, of course, it's good. It is updated in May 2023. So it covers a lot of aspects, almost all aspects of the publications, medical journal publications. So you can learn a lot by this. The second guideline is called COPE, Committee of Publication Ethics. It is UK-based guidelines, and it is promoting integrity in research and its publication. So you can get membership of this committee also. The charges are quite nominal, in maybe 60, I think 60 pounds. But if you want an institutional membership, then it is the cost is a bit higher. So COPE is very giving you very nice, very useful guidelines of publication. Now we come to the 5 sins of publications, and when I am listing these sins, I'm keeping in mind the particular setup of a particular culture in Pakistan, in our country. By the way, I tell you, I work in Pakistan. I'm in UK. I'm just for holidays with my son and daughter-in-law. So after 1 week, maybe I will be back. So while I'm writing these since it is very much pertinent to our own society in Pakistan. First sin is gift authorship, which is very, very common. Then is data fabrication, data falsification, plagiarism, and failure to disclose. Okay. So one by one, we will discuss these. Now, first discussing about the gift authorship or ghost authorship. So who is exactly an author by as a definition of ICMG? This is quite new thing, and many of the bit older doctors may not be knowing it. Now, the authorship criteria is totally revised. There have to be 4 criteria to be followed. Substantial contribution to the conception, design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, interpretation of the data. Then drafting the work or reviewing it critically for important intellectual content, final approval of the version to be published, and fourth, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work, in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. That means previously it was good enough that if we have just conceived the study, somebody has done the experiments, the third person has written the manuscript, so it was okay. But now all the authors should be part of all the process. Very simply, all the authors should be carrying out all the process. All the authors should be involved in the conception, they should be involved in the critical work, and they should be involved in the review, in the manuscript writing, and finally, all should agree to be accountable. If there is some objection, if there is some inquiry, all the authors should be answerable to that inquiry. So what is gift authorship? Also known as ghost authorship, a form of intellectual corruption rampant in developing countries like Pakistan, very commonly. People, your friends will say, please put, मैं उर्दू में कहूँगा कि मेरा नाम यार आर्टिकल में डाल देना, यार मेरा नाम मुझे चाहिए आर्टिकल, मुझे लिख दें. अक्सर मैंने लिखा तो नहीं, लेकिन और मैं बता भी उर्दू में रहा हूँ ताकि हमारे लोग सारे अपने लोग ही सर समझें ये बात. अगर कोई नॉन उर्दू स्पीकिंग है तो मेरा ख्याल है वो ना ही समझे इसको. ये बड़ा कॉमन है हमारे यहाँ कि वाइफ ने आर्टिकल लिखा और हस्बैंड का नाम डाल दिया, हस्बैंड ने लिखा वाइफ का नाम डाल दिया, मदर ने लिखा बेटे का नाम डाल दिया, ठीक है, बाप ने लिखा तो बेटी का नाम डाल दिया. तो ये इट इज गिफ्ट ऑथरशिप एंड इट शुड टोटली बी अवॉइडेड. हाँ, अगर दोनों मियाँ बीवी रिसर्च में कॉमन है, वो कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, वो तो डाल सकते हैं, लेकिन सिर्फ उसका नाम डालने के लिए और सोशल प्रेशर से ये अवॉइड करना चाहिए. जनरेटर्स कैन डिटेक्ट गिफ्ट ऑथरशिप. कैसे डिटेक्ट करते हैं? यूज ऑफ इंडिविजुअल ईमेल रादर देन. ये बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है. हमारे यहाँ लोग इंडिविजुअल ईमेल्स यूज करते हैं. इंस्टेड ऑफ दैट you should use the institutional email. Then same email address by more than one author. This also gives suspicion. First publication by an author poses a bigger challenge. If you have not any previous publication, of course you'll have a first publication one day, but be careful. Your first publication is more thoroughly scrutinized to see that if there is any gift authorship, etc. Then data fabrication. Data fabrication means making up data or results and recording or reporting them, or creating data without any research process. You have not done any research. totally, and you have just sat on your laptop and created the Excel file and wrote the results. Also called cooked data. We also call them cooked data. Journal may ask evidence of data collection procedure, for example, equipment tracing, hospital records, etc. So journal can now ask the raw data, and then they can detect whether it is fabricated or not. Partial data fabrication is more common to make up the deficient sample size. For example, if you required 200 samples, then you have just got 180 and subjects. Actually, your requirement sample size was 200, and you couldn't get 20 more. So what people do that for 20 they will enter the fabricated data. It's very, very bad, and if it is detected, then it can risk your reputation. All kinds of fabrication is a publication sin. Remember this. As a Muslim, we should. It is amounts to telling a lie. So telling a lie or झूठ बोलना तो वैसे ही बहुत बड़ा गुनाह है. So fabrication is a publication sin. Then data falsification. That means changing the data, manipulation in materials, equipment, or process, or changing or omitting data or results such that the research is not accurately presented in the research record. So changing the data or equipment or images, anything. Manipulating research data to change negative or inclusive results to positive, producing positive results is a compulsive behavior of authors. In our authors, they like the positive results. That although the result can be negative, what this means is that you're investigating for example, a drug, and you're saying whether this drug is good in diabetes mellitus or not, and you found that the drug is not good. The results are negative. You must report it like this, and don't change it. And even if it is inconclusive, you have to report this. So negative reporting should be inculcated, and it should be a part of your research finding. No harm in that. A common scenario is topping up data when samples collected are short of sample size, which I talked earlier also. Failure to disclose is very important, and you must have heard the word of conflict of interest. In every article, every publication, you have to mention the conflict of interest. Conflict of interest means that you do not have any personal involvement in it. I give you an example, that you are doing a trial of a drug, and the company which makes that drug, you are employee of that company, or you get some financial benefit from that company. Okay, it's okay, not bad. You can be employee of that company. You can get some financial benefit from that company. No harm in that, but you have to mention it. You have to disclose it. Failure to disclose is the sin. So you always, any shareholding or monetary benefits from the company whose products are used in research must be declared. Concealing any such information is a big sin in publication, and the journal may withdraw the paper even if it is otherwise perfect. If in doubt, declare. So declaring, it's not bad thing. You become safe when you declare. Conflict of interest is a part of each individual publication unit or oral presentation. Now, last sin, and I will take some more time in this, is plagiarism. What is plagiarism? It is appropriating another person's ideas, process, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. So when you take someone's ideas or process without giving credit to them, if you give credit, then it is okay, really okay. The term plagiarism originates from Latin word plagium, meaning kidnapping a man. Literally means theft. Another definition is taking material authored by others and presenting as someone else. यानी आपने खुद नहीं किया लेकिन किसी से लिया है और आप ऐसे शो करें जैसे ये मेरा अपना हो. Plagiarism is the most common sin of research. Plagiarism can be of words, ideas, intentional, or it can be intentional or it can be unintentional. What are the types of plagiarism? Stealing of someone else's whole paper, for example, you have taken the whole paper written by someone else and you write your own name and send it for publication. Copying substantial part of another's paper, paraphrasing others' writing. Paraphrasing is changing words. You take some big chunk of someone's publication and you change some words in it and send it for publication without acknowledging it. Paraphrasing is okay if you have acknowledged the author, you have acknowledged the originator. Claiming results from others research, किसी और के रिजल्ट आपने ले लिए. So stealing others' ideas, words, linguistic style without acknowledging intellectual originator is plagiarism. Plagiarism of words can be direct form, complete or partially copying of text, image, audio, or video recording without acknowledging the primary source. So the most important part is without acknowledging, it becomes plagiarism. Mosaic form, borrowing ideas and opinion from multiple sources. Self-plagiarism. This is very important. When you become senior, you can have you can quote your previous publication, your previous work, but you have to give reference. If you do not give reference and you simply reproduce what you have already published, then it becomes self-plagiarism. It's very important to understand. I repeat, if you take your previous work, your previous part of previous publication without giving reference, then it becomes self-plagiarism. Duplicated publication, sending same publication to more than one author. Types of duplicated publications are duplicated whole articles. If you send same article to more than one journal, then it is plagiarism. Substantially overlapping data. You have sent two different articles, but the data is overlapping. Then publishing by same or different authors. ये भी हो सकता है आप अपना नाम चेंज करके उसमें भेज दें. Or all overlapping data publication are not unethical. But remember that overlapping data may occur, and the editors, editors have to decide that is it okay or not. There is another term which is called slimy slicing. Slimy slicing is very interesting. Slimy slicing, a slimy publication refers to inappropriate fragmentation of data into smaller publications. Usually the data is generated in the same study. I'll give you an example. Two articles with data generated separately for males and female subjects in the same study. For example, you have carried a study of a drug and you have got male subjects and female subjects. So for male subjects, you send one article, and for female subjects, you send another article. So this is called slimy slicing, meaning that means unethical fragmentation. Fragmentation can be done, but it should be according to some principles. So, and once again, the editors decide whether it is ethical or not. The aim is usually to increase the number of publications. All fragmentations are not unethical, beware. Plagiarism detecting software tools. There are very nice software tools which can detect plagiarisms. Manuscripts are automatically checked against a database of 30+ million peer-reviewed papers and student works. Turnitin mostly used by universities and other education institutes. And I think Authenticate used by publishing houses. So I have some experience with Turnitin. I'll tell you what is Turnitin. I got a membership of Turnitin also, so it is my offer. If you want to get your article or your publication checked by Turnitin, I can do it. And we put the article in the software and try to find how much is the similarity index. Now, this is a typical Turnitin report of an article, which when I was an editor of Pakistan Journal of Pathology, we used to put the articles in Turnitin. So it is showing that similarity index is 7%. Up to Pakistan Health Higher Education Commission has authorized 19%, up to 19% similarity index is okay. So if more, it is more than 19%, then it's not okay. So in this particular article, the similarity is 7%, 6% from internet source and publications, and student paper 0. And these are the major pathology journal 2%, and there is one particular article 2%, and then particular side 2%, and this particular side is 2%. And we can exclude. Furqan, your question was about the inside quoting. Then inside quoting, if it is more than some percentage, for example, more than 2% of the total article, then it is not acceptable. Only less than 2% can be excluded. You can make it up to 5%. It depends on the general policy, but we used to keep it up to 2%. And then we exclude quotes. Quotes are excluded, so it's okay if you write quotes. And then exclude bibliography. We exclude the references, because the references are commonly written by all, or maybe written by more than one article. So bibliography or references are excluded, quotes are excluded, and up to 2% matches are excluded. Now, the bigger challenge is plagiarism in the era of AI. Using any form of AI software, ChatGPT or etc., you can very easily make an article. So please don't do that. It is once again plagiarism, and it's posing a big challenge for the editors to detect this sort of plagiarism. So this is my last slide. Ethics in research and publication are of utmost importance. Students should inculcate the habit of original ideas, ethical research, and manuscript in own words. So the idea should be original, the research should be ethical, and manuscript should be in your own words, then it is perfectly okay. Any unethical research and publication may lead to severe damage to one's reputation. Please remember this thing. Thank you very much. Over to you, Inshra.
Sir, there are a few questions. First
Please.
one is, how can it be established by a journal that the provided data is fabricated? What is the methodology involved?
Yes, this is a very good question. It's not an easy thing to detect fabrication of data, but there are methods with experience. For example, I give you an example. You are working on a disease which is not very common. For example, you are working on Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and somebody send you the data of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and they say that we have collected these data in patients in last 6 months, whereas the prevalence of that particular disease is not so much that you can find those in such a high number of patients in 6 months. So most probably it was fabricated. This actually happened in the specialty of ophthalmology, that somebody sent an article to College of Physicians and Surgeon Journal of a disease which was not very prevalent, and ultimately it was found that it was fabricated. The next question, please.
If you use data from one previous publication, but use different methodologies to interpret, gather more data for comparison with the previous part of a set of data, is that duplication?
No, it's not. Because in discussion, you do comparison of data of previously published article. That previously published article may have been used by some other publisher also. So no harm in that, but you have to do it in your own words. This is very important. that you have to do your own words, and if you are quoting some others words, then it should be in inverted commas, and if it is you are again using their idea or words and you paraphrase it, and you must give reference to that, but not more than 2% of that publication. Next.
What's the difference between data fabrication and data falsification?
Yes, thank you for asking this question. I'm very happy. Fabrication means you have not done anything, and you have just sat on the laptop and made an Excel file or SPSS file and wrote the findings for blood pressure, for blood glucose, for urea, for creatinine. Just all the data you have entered in yourself, or you have partially fabricated. I give an example that you had collected data of 100 patients, but next 100 you have written by yourself. This is partial fabrication. Whereas falsification is that you have collected data, and okay, for 200 patients you have collected data of blood pressure, urea, creatinine, glucose, but you have changed the findings to bring the results of your own choice. For example, your drug was not good enough to reduce the blood pressure, but you want to give a positive finding, so you change the finding of blood pressure. This is called data falsification. So data falsification is changing, and data fabrication is totally writing data at your own, cooking the data. The next.
Would paraphrasing AI still count as plagiarism?
Yes. Bilkul. If AI has paraphrased it and you are using it, and then you must do it by giving the reference. Using the AI for paraphrasing is okay. It's no harm in that. But doing it without acknowledging the originator is plagiarism. That you must give credit to that person whose data you are paraphrasing. Next.
I think, sir, this was the last question.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amir, for giving your time and for such an amazing presentation.
Thank you, Beta. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Amir, for your presentation. Now I introduce Dr. Sairus Zafar from the Associate Professor of the Department of Pharmacology at CMH Lahore Medical College and Institute of Dentistry, who will be giving a short presentation on the publication process, on choosing the right journal, and on predatory journals and other challenges faced during the publication process.
Thank you, Amir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I appreciate the presence of the attendees here, and thank you for inviting me as well. I'm Dr. Sairus Zafar, working as Associate Professor in Pharmacology Department. I'm also the founder of Key2 Pharmacology, which is an online platform for pharmacology. Here, today, we're going to talk about understanding the publication process. So, we are going to discuss how to choose the right journal, what are the requirements for manuscript submission, what is the peer review process and its significance, what are the common challenges in the publication process, and how to avoid the predatory journals. Starting off, सबसे पहली बात ये है कि we have to decide where to publish. To publish आप कहाँ कर सकते हैं? There are conference proceedings, there are book chapters, but mainly we publish our original articles to the journals, or even the systemic reviews and the review articles and meta-analysis. So how to choose that journal? सबसे पहला आपका step क्या है कि you have to see what are the broad areas that a journal covers. Dr. Sadiq has previously discussed this as well. Okay, I would like to inculcate some daily layman examples here ताकि आपको ना उसका concept समझ आ जाए. For example, let's say you're a chef और आपने कोई Chinese dish बनाई है. So where would you go and ask कि इस dish को जो है वो किस restaurant में serve किया जाए? आप किसी इंडियन रेस्टोरेंट में जाकर उसको सर्व नहीं करा सकते, आप किसी टर्किश रेस्टोरेंट में जाकर उसको सर्व नहीं करा सकते. यू नीड टू फाइंड अ गुड चाइनीज रेस्टोरेंट जिसमें आपकी डिश जो है वो यहाँ जाके सर्व की जा सके. दैट इज एग्जैक्टली द केस. जब आप कोई मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट अपना लेके जाते हैं, यू हैव टू फाइंड द राइट जर्नल. क्या उस जर्नल के स्कोप में वो टॉपिक है जिसके ऊपर आप काम कर रहे हैं? अगर आपका काम पल्मोनरी डिजीजेस के ऊपर है तो आप उसको हेमेटोलॉजिकल डिजीजेस में पब्लिश नहीं करा सकते. सो राइट टॉपिक सबसे पहली आपकी फर्स्ट सिलेक्शन है. देन peer reviewed journal होना चाहिए. What is a peer review? I would like the attendees to participate either through chat ताकि थोड़ा सा हमारा इंटरैक्टिव इसमें जो है ना वो कॉन्सेप्ट बने. I would really like to know कि आप लोगों का अभी तक बैकग्राउंड नॉलेज है क्या? What do you know about the peer review process already? Peer review का मतलब ये है कि the article is sent to the specialist of the same subject. अगर फार्माकोलॉजी का एक आर्टिकल है तो वो फेलो फार्माकोलॉजिस्ट को सेंड किया जाएगा और उनसे उनका क्रिटिकल अप्रेजल लिया जाएगा. हाउ डू दे इवैल्यूएट माय वर्क? फिर ये देखना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि आपका जो जर्नल है उसका प्रेस्टीज क्या है. प्रेस्टीज कैसे हम डिसाइड करेंगे किसी जर्नल का? देयर आर मल्टीपल फैक्टर्स जिनकी बेसिस पे डिसाइड करते हैं कि एक जर्नल की कितनी स्ट्रेंथ है उसकी पब्लिकेशंस की, कितना अच्छा फेयर उसका पीयर रिव्यू प्रोसेस है, कितनी ज्यादा साइटेशंस हैं उसकी, कितना इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर है उसका. देयर आर मल्टीपल फैक्टर्स व्हिच डिसाइड कि एक जर्नल की कितनी प्रेस्टीज है. Another important factor जो authors के लिए बहुत important होता है, that is the length of time from submission to publication. Now I have submitted an article and I need it, let's say, for promotion. तो I need to consider कि जिस journal में मैं publish करा रही हूँ, how much time is it going to take? अगर कोई 6-8 months लग जाते हैं मेरी publication को, तो maybe that does not suit me. But let's see, we have to consider other factors also. But yes, this is one of the factors that we do consider. And then the impact factor जिसको हम आगे भी डिटेल में डिस्कस करेंगे. So you see how to find the journal. अब हमने डिसाइड कर लिया हमने एक अच्छा जर्नल चूज करना है, क्रेडिबल जर्नल चूज करना है, पर कहाँ से करना है? So there are multiple journal finders. ये जो publishing houses होते हैं जो journals publish कर रहे होते हैं, they've got their pages and they've got very sophisticated journal finders like Wiley, Elsewhere, Springer. ये सब के जो है हमारे पास इनके अपने journal finders है. So let's have a brief look कि ये सब में क्या होता है. आप देखिए कि अगर आप वाइले का जर्नल फाइंडर व्हेन यू ओपन दैट वेबसाइट तो उसमें आपके पास एक ऑप्शन आ जाती है कि आप अपने मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट का टाइटल जो है यू जस्ट पुट इट इन एंड यू सर्च कि उस टाइटल से रेलेवेंट जो जर्नल्स है ना आपको उनकी लिस्ट मिल जाए. सो व्हाट आई डिड हियर वाज कि मेरा एक ऑलरेडी पब्लिश्ड आर्टिकल था जिसके ऊपर मैंने जो है वो अब कर दिया अपना जो है ना वो उसको सर्च में डाल दिया मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट. ठीक है. Now when I searched for it in Wiley, उसने मुझे कुछ relevant उसने कहा जी एडिक्शन एक जर्नल है इसका इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर है, सॉरी फॉर द इंट्रूजन, उसका ये इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर है, उसके जो है ये रेलेवेंस है. ठीक है. मेरा टॉपिक था जस्ट सो दैट यू गाइस कैन रिलेट हियर. मेरा टॉपिक जो मैंने यहाँ पे डाला था दैट वाज रेसेजुलिन फार्माकोकाइनेटिक्स इन स्मोकर्स वर्सेस नॉन स्मोकर्स. Now considering this topic, एक ड्रग है रेसेजुलिन, एक एंटी पार्किंसन ड्रग है. मैंने उसकी फार्माकोकाइनेटिक्स को स्टडी करना था कि स्मोकर्स में और नॉन स्मोकर्स में क्या डिफरेंस है. माय स्टडी रियली डज नॉट हैव मच टू डू विद एडिक्शन, पर वाइले ने सबसे पहला जो सबसे मोस्ट रेलेवेंट मुझे दिया वो एडिक्शन दिया क्योंकि उसने स्मोकर्स को पकड़ लिया आवाज. ठीक है. ओके. तो उसने हमें 2 फैक्टर्स दे दिए. उन्होंने बताया ओपन एक्सेस ऑप्शनल है, इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर है और रेलेवेंस है. मैंने यही सेम टॉपिक अपना एल्सवेयर में पुट किया, उसके जर्नल फाइंडर में पुट किया. नाउ कैन यू सी द डिफरेंस हियर? थोड़ा सा ज्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग जर्नल फाइंडर मुझे लगा एल्सवेयर का. व्हाई? उसने मुझे पहले तो यही बता दिया कि लुक्स लाइक दिस आर्टिकल हैज ऑलरेडी बीन पब्लिश्ड. तो उसने चीज को पिक कर लिया. कहाँ पब्लिश्ड है उसने मुझे वो भी बता दिया. इट इज ऑलरेडी पब्लिश्ड इन पाकिस्तान जर्नल ऑफ मेडिकल साइंसेज. सो दिस वाज वन थिंग कि ये आपको वाइले के जर्नल फाइंडर ने नहीं बताया था. देन even then उसने कहा कि okay let's say you want to publish this thing, so these are the journals which we think कि आपके जो है वो they are relevant. So you see उसने मुझे clinical therapeutics दिया, उसने मुझे उसका site score दिया, impact factor बताया, acceptance rate बताया, time to first editorial decision बताया and then time to publication बताया. So there are so many important factors that Elsewhere has provided me. And this would make it easier for me to decide कि मैंने इस जर्नल में पब्लिश कराना है या नहीं कराना है. यहाँ पे साथ में मुझे ये भी बता रहा है कि दिस इज एन ओपन एक्सेस जर्नल. So open access normally do have some processing charges as well. So ये भी information मैं यहाँ पे I will consider it. The next option is Springer. अब Springer की क्या बात है कि Springer जो है वो आपको बहुत narrowed down search provide करता है. ठीक है, Springer की जो search categories है उसने पहले मेरे से क्या क्या information मांगी. उसने कहा कि आप ये सब कुछ fill करके देंगे. What is the minimum impact factor that you want? What is the minimum acceptance rate? What is the maximum time to first decision? कहाँ indexed हो, आप ये पूरी information दे and then we will give you the name of the journal. So that means कि ये बहुत advanced search है, बहुत narrowed down search है, which is very good if I am that clear about all of these criteria. But if I am an early career researcher और मेरे पास इतनी ज़्यादा I do not have the options to choose from and I just want my article to be published, तो फिर मैं इतने ज़्यादा उसके ऊपर जो है वो check points नहीं लगाऊंगी. So yes, if you want a very narrowed down search, then you can go for the Springer Journal Finder. Then we have the Clarivate or the Web of Science. Web of Science क्या है? Again, it is a collection of the a depository of the journals. ठीक है, Clarivate की स्पेशल बात क्या है कि जो हम इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर की बात करते हैं, जो JCR होता है, which is a journal citation report, that is issued by Clarivate. ठीक है, Clarivate Web of Science it is just one group, different from Scopus, different from Elsewhere, different from Springer, different from many other publishing houses. ठीक है, तो इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर JCR जो है वो सिर्फ और सिर्फ Clarivate बताता है आपको. Now we can also have Web of Science. जरूरी नहीं है कि Web of Science पे जो जर्नल आपको मिल जाएगा listed उसका impact factor भी होगा. That is not at all necessary. JCR is a separate list जिसमें impact factors आते हैं. It is truly not mandatory कि Web of Science पे जो भी journals हैं वो सब पे impact factor होगा. No. So you have to be careful here. ठीक है. So looking at it, ये मुझे basically comparative to the other journal finders कुछ भी नहीं बता रहा. सिर्फ एक मैथ स्कोर दे रहा है, which is the kind of relevance generated कि जी ये आपके जो जर्नल है ना, this seems relevant to your topic. That's what it has to do. Now interestingly for beginners, I like journal guide. क्यों? Because अगर मुझे नहीं पता कि मैंने Elsewhere में जाना है या Web of Science में जाना है या Springer में जाना है, मैंने कौन से कराना है, और if I'm open, I just want a good journal with a good impact factor, so I can put it in the journal guide. The journal guide क्या करेगा, वो मुझे सारे journals जो है ना वो मुझे journals बता देगा, different publishers. It can be from the professional medical publications, Springer, BMJ, Taylor and Francis, किसी का भी होगा वो मुझे उसका impact factor बता देगा. जिसकी उसको पता होगा कि टाइप टू पब्लिकेशन क्या है मुझे वो भी बता देगा. ठीक है, एंड ओपन एक्सेस है या नहीं. नाउ व्हाई डू वी नीड टू नो कि जर्नल ओपन एक्सेस है या नहीं? द प्रॉब्लम इज कि ओपन एक्सेस जर्नल्स में आपके जर्नल्स आर द आर्टिकल्स वन पब्लिश, दे आर फ्री टू एक्सेस टू एवरीवन, बट वहां पे मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम द ऑथर हैज टू पे द आर्टिकल प्रोसेसिंग चार्जेस. दिस इज एन इम्पोर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट स्पेशली फॉर द स्टूडेंट्स हियर बेटा कि यू वांट टू टारगेट अ गुड इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर जर्नल. आप चाह रहे हो कि अच्छा इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर है लेकिन वो आगे से चार्जेस मांग रहा है. आप चार्जेस इज बियॉन्ड योर स्कोप राइट नाउ. ठीक है, डू नॉट बी वरीड. You can always go for a journal that is not open access, or even for the journals which offer that you either you can choose open access or not. You can always opt not to choose open access. उसका थोड़ा सा disadvantage ये होगा कि आपका article openly available नहीं होगा readers को और maybe उसकी citations कम होंगी. But on the other hand, उसका advantage क्या होगा कि there is an embargo period for some time, maybe 6 months, 1 year, कि वो journal उसको subscription पे रखता है to cover for the charges that you did not pay. ठीक है, उसके बाद वो भी बाद में open हो जाता होता है कभी कभी. So either this or otherwise ये क्या है कि फिर जो reader है उसको उसके लिए pay करना पड़ेगा, but you will not have to pay. So you will have an article in a good journal without paying the article processing charges. So author के level पे this can be one step which many authors opt for if resources are an issue, especially like for a country like us जहाँ पे आपको research grants और publication grants बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं मिलती हैं. Okay, so while we are at choosing the journal, the most important step is to avoid the predatory journals. Can anyone tell me what are predatory journals? Please write down in the chat box. तो देयर आर जर्नल्स जो क्लेम करते हैं कि दे आर पीयर रिव्यूड, बट उनका कोई एडिक्वेट पीयर रिव्यू पॉलिसी नहीं होती। मेन उनका टारगेट क्या होता है कि उन्होंने एक क्रिएट करना होता है इम्प्रेशन दैट दे आर अ वेरी क्रेडिबल जर्नल एंड दैट यू शुड पब्लिश, और वो ल्यूक्रेटिव ऑफर्स देते हैं कि वो फटाफट पब्लिश कर देंगे और एक्सेप्टेंस रेट बहुत अच्छा होगा। दे वुड एडवर्टाइज एन इनकरेक्ट जर्नल इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर। अपनी वेबसाइट पर लिखेंगे इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर दिस, विच इज 100% रॉन्ग, क्योंकि अगर आप JCR की आपकी एक्सेस होगी, द JCR रिपोर्ट is accessible to universities or it is available on paid subscriptions. तो जब आप JCR की लिस्ट खोल के देखेंगे तो उसमें उस जर्नल का कहीं पे भी नाम नहीं होगा। सो रॉन्ग इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर मेंशन किया होगा उन्होंने। फिर वो सब आर्टिकल्स पब्लिश कर देंगे। दे प्रैक्टिकली हैव एन एक्सेप्टेंस रेट ऑफ 100%। वो एक इम्प्रेशन थोड़ा सा क्रिएट करेंगे, एक क्या उसे कहते हैं कि बस एक है ना वो कहानी क्रिएट करेंगे कि हाँ जी आपका पीयर रिव्यू में गया, एडिटोरियल प्रोसेस में क्या, बट असल में वो कहीं भी नहीं गया होगा। वो आपने सबमिट कराया, उन्होंने पब्लिश किया ऑन एक्सेप्टिंग दी आर्टिकल प्रोसेसिंग चार्जेस, बिकॉज उनका काम क्या है, उन्होंने आपसे पैसे लेने, वो वहां पे प्रॉफिट लेने के लिए बैठे हैं। ठीक है, अब उनका एडिटोरियल बोर्ड, अब आप अगर देखें इन चीजों को थोड़ा सा, अगर आप जर्नल का पेज खोलें, आप देखेंगे एडिटोरियल बोर्ड कैसा है, उसमें क्या है, तो देयर माइट बी पीपल हु डू नॉट एग्जिस्ट। एडिटर का नाम लिखा हुआ है जी फलाना फलाना, PhD इन फलानी फील्ड, वर्किंग इन फलाना इंस्टीट्यूट। आप उसको गूगल करें, आपको वो बंदा ही नहीं मिलेगा। और देयर माइट बी पीपल के लेट्स से जर्नल फार्माकोलॉजी का है, एडिटर जो है वो जूलॉजी बैचलर्स बैठा हुआ है। What is the point? इसका मतलब है कि कुछ यहाँ पे there is some problem. ठीक है, their affiliations it cannot be verified. अपनी तरफ से किसी भी यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम लिख दिया, this person is working in फलानी यूनिवर्सिटी, you cannot identify कि वो वाकई वहाँ काम कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा। और कभी कभी तो ऐसे होता है कि there are real people working in real universities but they do not even know कि उनको they don't even know कि वो listed है। उनका नाम लिखा होगा, लेट्स से मेरा नाम किसी जर्नल ने लिखा हुआ है कि आई एम वर्किंग एज एन एडिटर इन दैट जर्नल, और मुझे पता ही नहीं कि मेरा नाम लिखा हुआ है। सो कुछ इनके ना देयर आर सर्टेन टेल टेल साइंस जो बता देते हैं कि ये आपका जो है ना ये प्रेडेटरी जर्नल है। ये कुछ ऐसी चीजें होती हैं जो क्रेडिबल जर्नल्स नहीं करते। ठीक है, दे विल एग्रेसिवली टारगेट द पोटेंशियल ऑथर्स थ्रू ईमेल्स। और ये टारगेटिंग कैसी होती है, दे मेक यू फील कि आपका एक आर्टिकल जो आपका पब्लिश होगा ना, वो उसको लेके आपको रिगोरसली ईमेल्स करते रहेंगे और इतना प्रेज करेंगे, आपको इससे लगेगा कि पता नहीं आपने क्या कमाल काम कर दिया। किसको टारगेट करेंगे? अर्ली करियर मिड करियर रिसर्चर्स को, बिकॉज वो इजीली इसमें स्कैम हो जाते हैं। कॉन्स्टेंटली ईमेल करेंगे, प्लीज गिव अस एन आर्टिकल, प्लीज गिव अस अ पब्लिकेशन, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन योर दिस वर्क, वी हाईली अप्रिशिएट दिस, और ये इस तरह करके आपको ईमेल्स आएंगी, बार बार आएंगी। ठीक है, फिर अगर आप उनकी डिटेल्स देखेंगे तो उनका जो ऑफिस है वो लिखा होगा जी ये दिस इज अ जर्मन पब्लिकेशन। ठीक है, ऑफिस इंडिया में होगा, बांग्लादेश में होगा। कॉरस्पॉन्डिंग ईमेल्स जो हैं उनमें आपको या वेबसाइट में आपको आप देखेंगे ना, आपको ग्रामेटिकल एरर्स मिलेंगे, बिकॉज ऑब्वियसली दे आर नॉट वेरी वेल एग्जीक्यूटेड। बड़े कोई अच्छे एकेडमिक क्रेडेंशियल्स वाले लोग ये काम नहीं कर रहे होते। ठीक है, there is lack of transparency about the article processing charges. Once they get the article processing charges, वो इतनी स्पीड में आपका आर्टिकल पब्लिश करेंगे कि जब तक आप रियलाइज करें कि ये जर्नल क्रेडिबल नहीं है, तब तक वो उसको पब्लिकेशन प्रोसेस में भेज देंगे एंड दे डू नॉट लेट यू विदड्रॉ योर आर्टिकल। उनकी कोई विदड्रॉल पॉलिसी होती ही नहीं है। जनरली द गुड जर्नल्स जैसे जर्नल ऑफ CPSP है, all the credible journals, they have a withdrawal form on their website that if for any reason you have to give your reason कि आप withdraw करना चाहते हैं अपना article and you can withdraw your article. But the predatory journals, they do not have any withdrawal policy. Once you are trapped, you are trapped. आपका काम जाया हो गया। So for these reasons, predatory journals को हमने avoid करना है और अच्छे journal में अपना manuscript भेजना है। Now, when we are sending the manuscript to a journal, what are the various factors which the editors are looking for? आप देखें कि जिस तरह डॉक्टर सादिक also talked about it, आपकी एक अच्छी स्टडी होनी चाहिए, उसकी क्वालिटी होनी चाहिए, उसकी अच्छी प्रेजेंटेशन होनी चाहिए, ओरिजिनलिटी होनी चाहिए। It should be consistent with the scope of the journal. This cannot be emphasized enough again and again. आप बहुत अच्छा काम गलत जर्नल में सबमिट कराएंगे, you will face rejection and this will demoralize you. अपना होमवर्क करें, अपने जर्नल को बहुत थॉटफुली चूज करें so that your chances of acceptance increase. अब देखिए एडिटर के एंड से आप सोचो, एडिटर का काम क्या है? एडिटर ने अपने जर्नल में ऐसे आर्टिकल्स को पब्लिश करना है which have better chances of reading, जिसकी रीडरशिप ज्यादा होगी और जिसकी साइटेशन के चांसेस ज्यादा होंगे. बिकॉज व्हाट इज इट दैट जर्नल्स वांट फ्रॉम द आर्टिकल्स? जर्नल्स वांट देयर इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर टू बिल्ड अप ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द आर्टिकल्स दैट आर पब्लिश्ड. तो वो आर्टिकल्स को चूज करना चाहेंगे जिनकी साइटेशन के चांसेस ज्यादा होंगे, जिनकी बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग स्टोरी होगी, जिसको पढ़ के लगेगा कि ये उस जर्नल के स्कोप पे बिल्कुल सही 100% फिट होती है और उसके जो रीडर्स हैं उस जर्नल के वो अप्रिशिएट करेंगे, इसको रीड करेंगे और इसको साइट करेंगे. दैट इज व्हाट द एडिटर्स आर लुकिंग फॉर. सो एडिटर्स अपनी हर जर्नल की अपनी ऑथर गाइडलाइंस देते हैं. एंड एज डॉक्टर सादिक ऑल्सो एम्फसाइज्ड, ऑथर गाइडलाइंस आर नॉट समथिंग दैट यू कैन इग्नोर. आपको एक रिटन पॉलिसी दे दी गई है कि दिस इज द फॉर्मेट ऑन विच यू हैव टू सबमिट योर मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट. तो आपने उसी पे ही कराना है. आप उसका पर्पस एंड स्कोप देख लें, आप मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट प्रिपरेशन गाइडलाइंस को अच्छी तरह स्टडी करें, व्हाटएवर फॉर्मेट इज वांटेड, व्हाटएवर रेफरेंसिंग फॉर्मेट इज वांटेड, आप उसको फॉलो करें एंड देन यू कैन फॉलो द मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट सबमिशन प्रोसेस एज डिस्क्राइब्ड इन द गाइडलाइंस. तो अब हमारा पर्पस यहाँ पे क्या बन गया है कि वी हैव टू अट्रैक्ट द एडिटर. हमने एडिटर को थ्रू आवर आर्टिकल कन्विंस करना है कि आवर आर्टिकल इज स्ट्रॉन्ग इनफ, वर्दी इनफ टू बी पब्लिश्ड इन योर जर्नल. ठीक है, देयर आर अ लॉट ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटीज फॉर रिजेक्शन. आपका पेपर बहुत सारे लोगों के साथ compete कर रहा है. देयर आर सो मेनी अदर ऑथर्स दैट हैव अप्लाइड एज वेल. तो आपको क्यों चूज किया जाए? देयर आर टू थिंग्स हियर, योर टाइटल एंड योर एब्स्ट्रैक्ट. आई वुड अगेन turn to a daily life example here. ठीक है, journal is a library of articles. ठीक है, इमेजिन करें आप अपनी लाइफ में एक आपके पास एक विजुअल लाइब्रेरी है जिसका नाम है नेटफ्लिक्स. आप वो लाइब्रेरी ओपन करते हैं, आप नेटफ्लिक्स ओपन करते हैं एंड यू डिसाइड कि आपने यू हैव सो मेनी ऑप्शंस टू चूज फ्रॉम, बट आपने कोई एक सीजन स्टार्ट करना है, कोई एक मूवी देखनी है. व्हाट वुड यू लुक फॉर? आपके पास ये टाइम तो नहीं है ना कि आप एक एक को पूरा एंड तक देख के डिसाइड करेंगे वाज इट गुड इनफ और नॉट. सो व्हाट विल यू डू? यू विल लुक एट द टाइटल्स, यू विल लुक एट देयर टाइटल कवर पिक्चर्स. आपको टाइटल अगर इंटरेस्टिंग लगेगा, आपको कवर पिक्चर इंटरेस्टिंग लगेगी तो आप कहेंगे अच्छा हाँ दिस सीम्स इंटरेस्टिंग, ओके लेट्स सी व्हाट इट इज अबाउट. आप उसकी थोड़ा सा जो समरी दी होती है ना साथ में, थोड़ा सा साइनॉप्सिस दिया होता है, प्लान दिया होता है, आप उसको रीड करेंगे. ठीक है, उसको रीड करके आप कहेंगे बोरिंग लग रहा है, नो आई डोंट वांट टू वॉच इट, आप उसको बंद कर देंगे. दैट इज व्हाट द एडिटर्स आर डूइंग विद यू. आपका एब्स्ट्रैक्ट पढ़ते ही एडिटर डिसाइड कर लेता है कि क्या इसमें ऐसी बातें हैं जो हमारे रीडर्स को अट्रैक्ट करेंगी. एंड इफ द एडिटर थिंक्स कि नहीं है, तो आउटराइटली देयर आर सर्टेन जर्नल्स जो व्हेन यू अप्लाई फॉर द आर्टिकल सबमिशन, 1-2 दिन में आपको रिजेक्शन आ जाती है. अब 1-2 दिन में रिजेक्शन कैसे आती है? 1-2 दिन में किसने क्या पढ़ा होगा? एडिटोरियल स्टाफ ने एब्स्ट्रैक्ट पढ़ा होगा, तो वहीं पे डिसाइड कर लिया होगा नो वी डोंट वांट दिस. टाइटल देखा होगा, एब्स्ट्रैक्ट देखा होगा, उनको इंटरेस्टिंग नहीं लगा होगा. दिस इज वेयर यू हैव टू वर्क वेरी स्ट्रांगली. आपका टाइटल शुड नॉट बी अ मेयर टाइटल. इट शुड बी समथिंग दैट अट्रैक्ट्स द एडिटर एंड द रीडर टू फॉलो इट, कि वो आगे भी पढ़े कि आगे क्या बात है. देन द एब्स्ट्रैक्ट इज योर प्लॉट. जितना प्लॉट इंटरेस्टिंग बनाएंगे उतना देयर विल बी क्यूरियोसिटी इन द एडिटर और द रीडर टू रीड द फुल आर्टिकल. इफ यू फेल हियर, तो आगे आपने जितना मर्जी अच्छा आर्टिकल लिखा होगा वहां तक बात ही नहीं पहुंचेगी. So this is where you have to be strong. Your abstract should clearly state why your work was done, how was it done, what were the results, and what were the implications of those results. So when you write your manuscript, these things have already been discussed, so I'll just skim through. You need to have a strong introduction which engages the reader. Introduction आपका एक plot होता है, एक story होती है which जो आपका एक set करती है scene को कि जी ये background था and this was the picture and this is where we found the gap, so this is where we are going to work. Then you come to the work. आप clearly, logically organized methods you are going to describe them, and you have to provide enough information कि अगर कोई उस स्टडी को रिपीट करना चाहे तो दैट पर्सन शुड बी एबल टू रिपीट इट। अगर मैंने एक स्टडी की है, फार्माकोकाइनेटिक मॉडल बनाया है रिसर्जिलीन के लिए, एंड देयर इज सम अदर रिसर्चर इन लेट्स से ईरान who wants to make the same pharmacokinetic model for another drug, तो मेरा इतना complete method होना चाहिए कि उसको पढ़ के the other researcher can replicate the study, can follow the same method and can produce the same results. Again, let's come back to the daily life examples. आपसे कोई केक की रेसिपी पूछ लेता है, how to make a cake, तो आप अगर उस रेसिपी में उसको सिर्फ इंग्रेडिएंट्स के नाम दे देते हैं, that wouldn't be enough. अगर आप उसको बताते ही नहीं है कि पहले क्या डालना है, बाद में क्या डालना है, बीट कब करना है, मिक्स कब करना है, ग्राइंड किसको करना है, आपने कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन ही नहीं दी, बेकिंग टेम्परेचर क्या है, तो यूजलेस है। और अगर आप उसमें से कोई एक स्टेप भी मिस कर देते हैं तो द पर्सन जिसको आपने रेसिपी दी वो आपकी सेम प्रोडक्ट नहीं बना सकेगा। सो दिस इज जस्ट लाइक गिविंग अ रेसिपी। आप एक मेथड की रेसिपी एक अपने रिसर्चर को दे रहे हैं कि जी ये दिस इज द कंप्लीट लिस्ट ऑफ स्टेप्स दैट इफ यू फॉलो दीज you will end up having the same results as mine. Then your results have to be very clear. Results बहुत crisp होने चाहिए। Results जो है ना वो facts होते हैं, वहां पे कहानियां नहीं, कहानियां इंट्रोडक्शन में, कहानियां डिस्कशन में, not in results. Just state the facts. ये इंक्रीज हुआ, ये डिक्रीज हुआ, ये स्टैटिस्टिकली सिग्निफिकेंट था, ये नहीं था। ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन कर रहे हैं तो टेक्स्ट में रिपीट ना करें, टेबल बना रहे हैं तो ग्राफ ना बनाएं, रिपीटेशन नहीं चाहिए। Find the medium which you see, which seems most appropriate to you for illustration of results. आपको लगता है कि graphs better explain कर सकते हैं, just make the graphs. आपको लगता है tables better explain कर सकते हैं, just make the tables. आपको लगता है कि आप text में लिख के इसको better explain कर सकते हैं, use that, but do not repeat. And then discussion. Discussion is your ground. इससे ऊपर तक ना when you are writing the introduction तो आप background knowledge literature review कर रहे होते हैं, you are quoting other people, giving references, आप build up कर रहे होते हैं अपनी सारी बात को। methods आपने भी जाहिर है कि कहीं ना कहीं से references लेके अपने methods compile किए होते हैं। Now discussion is your area, your results, whatever you want to talk about your results, उसमें क्या discrepancies आई, क्या difficulties आई in performing that methodologies, आपके results की interpretation क्या है, what do you think, why certain factor decreased, what could have been the reasons, why it increased, what were the differences from other studies, was it similar to other studies, आप इस तरह के comparisons draw करते हैं and you reach a conclusion. Discussion पे आप आपकी अपनी intellectual story जो है that is all in your discussion, and the stronger your discussion is, the more convincing it is for the editor to publish your article, क्योंकि आपने justify कर दिया है। Again, reinforcing Professor Amir Ejaz's words here कि there is no right or wrong or positive or negative. Results negative भी हो सकते हैं जो आपने anticipate किया था वो results नहीं आए, but justify that in your conclusion. Conclusion में बताएं कि these might be the reasons जिसकी वजह से ये results ऐसे आए हैं, and these were the logical reasons जिसकी वजह से we were expecting otherwise. Clearly state the differences, address them, and logically interpret and analyze them. That's your discussion. So talking about the publication process, आप कभी-कभी तो submit कराते हैं, उसी वक्त reject हो जाता है। ये वो rejection है जो title और abstract की basis पे हो गई है। अच्छा, title और abstract अगर आपका accept कर लिया editor ने, so this is your first win, तो आपका peer review में चला जाएगा। peer review में क्या है, there will be 3 or 4 reviewers in the same subject specialty जो आपके article को critically evaluate करेंगे, देखेंगे कि क्या वाकई इतना अच्छा काम है कि publish कर दिया जाए। Let's say peer review पे आपके 2 or more reviewers कहते हैं कि no, this is a weak study, वो वहीं पर reject हो जाएगा। या maybe they would advise some revisions, और हो सकता है revision के बाद भी accept हो जाए, या revisions के बाद मज़ीद revisions भी advise की जा सकती हैं। So this is like it is a tedious process, so you have to keep up with it. क्या कर सकते हैं हम? How to increase the chances of publication? Before you submit, you get an internal review. Internal review क्या होता है? You ask your peers. आप देखो, आपने एक चीज लिखी है ना, when you write an article, तो आपका tunnel vision बन जाता है, because you are studying so many things, working on so many things, analyzing it. तो there are so many factors जो आपका mind fails to understand or include at that time. Give it to any other person. तो वो रीड करके कहेगा यार उसमें देखो ये बात आपने नहीं मेंशन की हुई, तो एकदम इट वुड क्लिक कि हाँ आई शुड हैव मेंशन दैट. ठीक है, अपनी फील्ड में आउटसाइड योर फील्ड फार्माकोलॉजी आई वुड लाइक अ फिजियोलॉजिस्ट के प्लीज आप अपने रेफरेंस से जरा पढ़ें, आपको समझ आती है कि मैं क्या बात कर रही हूँ. ठीक है, सो उसके बाद सेकंड स्टेप क्या है कि आप इंस्ट्रक्शंस को बहुत बहुत स्ट्रिक्टली फॉलो करें. ये बिल्कुल यहाँ पे केयरलेसनेस नहीं होनी चाहिए कि वैंकूवर का आपको कहा गया है रेफरेंसिंग का आपने हार्वर्ड में की हुई है. ये तो खैर सीरियस मिस्टेक्स हैं, बिल्कुल आउटराइट रिजेक्शन है. इवन छोटी छोटी फॉर्मेटिंग भी है, जितनी अच्छी फॉर्मेटिंग होगी उतने आपके चांसेस ऑफ सबमिशन बढ़ जाएंगे. देन ऑलवेज राइट अ कवरिंग लेटर. नाउ कवरिंग लेटर अगेन इज योर चांस कि आप एडिटर को कन्विंस कर लें कि दिस इज द रीजन वी हैव डन दिस वर्क एंड दिस इज द रीजन यू शुड पब्लिश इट. And you have to submit it with the consent of all the authors to only one journal, जिसके ऊपर already research ethics के ऊपर Professor Amir has talked about it. So peer review process क्या है? For the quality control, आपका journal specialty से कुछ लोगों को, कुछ who are reputed to have expertise in that field, उनको लिया जाता है. peer review में भी reliability बहुत important है. देखिए अक्सर हमारे ना एक और बड़ा गलत कॉन्सेप्ट है कि हम ना कहते हैं कि जिसको अगर मैं कहूंगी अपनी फ्रेंड से कहूंगी यार आप इसे करें मेरे आर्टिकल को रिव्यू कर दें प्लीज कोई उसमें मिस्टेक्स मत निकालिएगा. दैट इज रॉन्ग. वहां पे क्या होता है कि जर्नल एडिटर्स आर वेरी स्मार्ट. वो वहीं पे देख लेंगे कि ये आर्टिकल जिसको रिव्यू किया गया है इसमें तो रिव्यू किया ही नहीं गया, ये तो ऐसे ही एक्सेप्ट कर दिया गया है. तो वो एडिटर्स विल नॉट कंसिडर दोज रिव्यूज. रिव्यूअर्स की रिलायबिलिटी कम हो जाएगी. नेक्स्ट टाइम उसको रिव्यू के लिए एडिटर भेजेगा ही नहीं आर्टिकल. So reviewers की reliability is very important. Reviewers आपके editor को help करते हैं decide करने में कि ये article, because reviewer की वो field है, editor की वो field में भी ना हो. Reviewer will reinforce your article कि जी ये बातें इसमें interesting हैं, ये latest advancements हैं, ये इसकी contribution है. These are the areas where improvements can be done and whether this paper should be published or it should be rejected. एडिटर ने उसकी बेसिस पे आपका डिसीजन लेना है. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात है कि जब आपको रिव्यूअर के कमेंट्स आते हैं, लेट्स से आप पीयर रिव्यू प्रोसेस पे आ गए, आपको रिव्यूअर कमेंट्स आए कि जी ये आपके आर्टिकल के ऊपर कमेंट्स हैं, डील देम वेरी वेरी सीरियसली. एंड बाय सीरियसली देखो देयर इज अ कॉन्सेप्ट आई फील स्पेशली इन पाकिस्तान, देयर इज नो कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टिव फीडबैक. हम फीडबैक को ना पॉजिटिवली लेते ही नहीं. अनफॉर्चुनेटली देने वाले पॉजिटिवली देते भी नहीं है और हम पॉजिटिवली लेते भी नहीं है. कोई हमारे काम पे कहता है ना कि इसमें ये चीज आपने गलत की है तो वी टेक इट पर्सनली. ये कौन है, अपने आप को क्या समझता है, उसने हमारे काम में कैसी गलतियां निकाल ली. टेक इट पॉजिटिवली. आपके आर्टिकल में वो चीजें इंप्रूव करेंगे. जो चीज कल को 10 रीडर्स पढ़ के आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे फ्लॉ को, उसको एक बंदे ने आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया है, पे हीट टू इट, उसको करेक्ट कर लें. रिस्पॉन्ड करें अपने रिव्यूअर के कमेंट्स को, और जितना अच्छा रिस्पॉन्ड करेंगे आप उतना एडिटर के लिए इजी होगा टू डिसाइड वेदर टू पब्लिश योर आर्टिकल और नॉट. सो दिस इज अ समरी हियर कि इन ऑर्डर टू राइट अ सक्सेसफुल पब्लिकेशन आपके पास एक बहुत अच्छी वेल डिजाइन स्टडी होनी चाहिए एंड यू नीड टू सिलेक्ट एन अप्रोप्रिएट जर्नल. देन यू शुड नो what do you want to write it clearly, make it an interesting story and highlight the results. अपनी जो significant findings हैं उनको highlight करें and then lastly respond carefully and positively to your reviewers' comments. So that's all about it. If you have any questions, please write down in the chat box. I have added the link here to the YouTube page of Keto Pharmacology. You can scan it and join the page for the pharmacology related content and videos. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any questions for Dr. Sairish? If so, please drop them in the chat. Seeing none for the moment, I'll hand it over to Mohammed Qasim And then if you have anything, we can always revert to questions. Over to you, Momina.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of whole NRC SF, I would like to thank Dr. Naveed, Dr. Ijaz, and Dr. Zafar for their knowledge and their guidance. I also thank Muhyiddin Research Club for organizing this webinar and providing the students of Lister to share their knowledge in the end. And I also thank CMH Research Society for providing their share of work in this webinar. Overall, it was very informative working with you all, and I learned a lot from all the speakers. And I would like to thank again to all the speakers for providing us with their time and knowledge. Thank you. I think now we have Natasha from CMH to give her concluding remarks.
Hello, Assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you so much, Momena. So I'm Natasha Nadeem, the president of CMH SRC. I've been listening into the webinar myself today as well, and it's been a really good experience because we as students like to organize these events for our fellows so that they can learn something. But I think for some of us who even at our fourth and final years, of course, we have a lot left to learn. So it was extremely informative for me as well, which is why I would like to thank all of the speakers today, Dr. Serish, Dr. Amir, as well as Dr. Sadiq. It has been a true honor to have listened into your insights and to also learn from you. I would also like to thank the other two colleges and their research societies, Nishtar Research Club as well as Muhyiddin Research Society. Thank you so much. It has been a really good collaboration. And I really look forward to future such projects. To all of the participants, I really hope that you can take something away from today. And at the very least, you have an idea that you want to start today. Thank you.
May I say some one comment? I just want to add one point. Some student asked about the audits, clinical audit from Dr. Naveed. I want to add something in that. Currently, I'm in UK for holidays, of course, but many doctors are approaching that they want internship in UK or they want jobs in UK after they have completed their lab process, everything. And in UK and in Pakistan and other countries also, a lot of importance is given to the clinical audits. Remember this thing. And why? Because in those countries where health services are of national responsibility, for example, in UK there is a big national health service, NHS. They always want to be sure that their resources are not wasted, the investigations done are appropriate, the medicines used are rational or not, and the procedures are done according to the indications or not. So they always welcome the clinical audits. Recently, some of my young students, they applied for jobs in UK, and they asked in the interview how many audits, clinical audits you have done. So please do carry out audits, and we can have a session also on how to carry out clinical audits or things like that. And it is published also, it can be a very nice publication too. So thank you very much. Just wanted to add this. I think Furqan, now should we leave now?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
I just want to thank you and Dr. Seris and the other societies. We made news. Thank you. I
Thank
have a
you.
little announcement.
Thank you very much.